You are now listening to Clay Mohr, the American storyteller.
Well, this is going to be one of these times when you wake up and can't get back to sleep. I wonder if it could have anything to do with the pack of coyotes howling in the back of my place. A lady friend of mine calls them children of the night. I call them a pain in the butt. What's even worse is when my German shepherds start howling back. Then it really gets annoying. Kind of reminds me of the novel by Jack London, Call It a Wild. You should read it when you have time, a great book. Well, such is life. I think I'll just bite the bullet and get going early today. Besides, I've got a lot going on the rest of the week, so it wouldn't hurt getting down to the yard early today. I grabbed some paperwork and headed out. As I drove down my drive to the road, I happened to look up and notice it was a full moon. No wonder it's brighter than usual for 5:30 in the morning, I said to myself. Maybe I'll make coffee right away and shock Angie when she gets in. I turned my computer on and went into the kitchen, made a pot of coffee. I better write Angie a note. The last time I made coffee, she thought it was left over from the day before and then threw it out. I went back into my office, logged on my computer. I used to leave this thing on all the time till Angie read me the riot act, citing all the security concerns. And yeah, I know, I said, I forgot. Some bad guys in a cave somewhere trying to rob all my money. And of course, nothing happens to them. Walk into a bank and try that. See what happens when you try to steal their money. Don't even get me going on that one. Okay, Clay, time to check your emails. I logged on to the site. When they all came up, I noticed one right away. The high school I went to always sends a newsletter out once a month. I signed up for it about a year ago. They have a section on where are they now. I figured that way I could keep track of these knuckleheads. So-and-so became a doctor, so-and-so became a lawyer. Well, folks, we all can't grow up to be rich and famous. Yeah, but all kidding aside, they've got a lot of good fundraisers and information about the community, things of that nature. They have a section for part-time help after school and on the weekends. When I saw it, couldn't help but think of some of the part-time jobs I had during those years. One of them sticks out way above the rest. I'd like to share it with you if you don't mind. There wasn't always a Clay Mohr trucking and excavating. I guess you might say, like so many other things, that it evolved as a result of life's journey. I had just recently gotten my driver's license and was in search of my first car. A few of my friends had gotten a car, and it seems like always helping them work on theirs. And I figured it was time to start working on my own. I had a little money saved up, so I figured I'd start looking around, when I could. Well, it just so happened I was over at a buddy of mine's looking at his car, and his dad came out. "How are you, Clay?" he remarked. I said, "Not bad, Mr. Burns, and you?" "Pretty good, young man," and he went on to tell me about a car that was for sale. I guess my buddy must have, said something that I was looking. That was one thing back in the day. Everybody always looked out for each other. He went on to tell me that there was one at a Shell gas station the next town over. He didn't know much about it, only that it looked pretty good from the outside. I asked my buddy, if he could run me over there sometime, and he said, well, sure, why not, this Saturday? It's okay. Saturday came around, and my friend and I headed over to the Shell station. Stormy Shell. And it was a big station. They did everything from rebuilding engines to fixing bicycle tires. We pulled up off to the side and got out. It didn't look too bad. 1963 Chevrolet Impala. We looked it over. Yeah, an older guy came over to talk to us. Are you Stormy? I asked the guy. Well, it turns out that there was a real Stormy. Heck, I was just kidding around, I thought to myself. The one and only, the big man replied. Interested in a car? Yeah, kind of. Well, let me tell you, it needs a little work. As he went on to tell me about it, I said to myself, it's not anything I haven't done for anyone else. We all went for a ride, and as we pulled back in, I figured it wouldn't be a bad, first car. How much you got to get, I asked Stormy. $500, Stormy replied. Heck, I thought it might as well be $500,000. I only had about $200 saved up at the time, and that was, way north of what I had. It don't look like, I'm going to be able to swing that. Stormy asked me, well, how much you got, kid? A little over 200, I said. Stormy paused for a minute and kind of scratched the back of his head and said, you got anything going on Saturdays? And not really, I just help the guys work on their cars. He said, you can come here and help me work on cars. Pump some gas and you pay off the rest of the car. Sure, I said in a blink of an eye. We start at 8 a.m. and go as long as there's work. Start next Saturday. I thought for a minute, I remembered you had to be 18, to work at a gas station at that time, and I was only 16. Well, I got to tell you, I'm only 16. Stormy replied, do you want the car or not, kid? Well, yeah, I said. All right, then stop wasting my time and be here next Saturday. That's when I found out you never argued with Stormy. I didn't find out until later that Mr. Burns actually knew Stormy and put a good word in for me. And like I said, everybody stuck together in those days. Saturday rolled around, and I got to Stormy's to report for my first day of work. And this place was really busy, I said to myself. Around noontime, a truck pulled up in front and parked. I went out and took a look. It was a catering truck. On the side, it said Chuck's Catering and had a horse head, similar like the knight on a chess piece. Chuck, I presume, got out and opened up the sides and the back glass. And for those of you that are not familiar with these type of trucks, they were a food truck that would drive around to businesses, factories, and job sites. They were pretty neat, and for the most part, always had pretty good food. Although some people used to call them roach coaches. Yeah, but for me, I always thought they were a lot better than this fast food poison, everybody's eating today. Stormy hollered over to me and said, come on, Clay, let's take a break. I walked over, and before I could say anything, Stormy looked at Chuck and said, this is the new kid. And Chuck said, hi, new kid. Stormy always buys lunch on Saturday, so, pick out whatever you want. Wow, I said, I said to myself, that's pretty neat. Try, finding something like that today. Yeah, right. That'll never happen. I was finishing up my first day when Stormy called me into his office. Sit down, he said. I noticed he had all the paperwork for the car on his desk. Are you getting home? He said to me without looking up. My buddy's gonna, pick me up. I quickly replied. He handed me the phone and said, call him. Let him know not to come. You can take the car. Yeah, but I still owe money on it. And Stormy kind of laughed and said, I know where to find you. Now take the paperwork and get out of here. I got to close up. Well, all right, I said, well, thanks a lot. I remembered once again, you don't argue with Stormy. I grabbed a bill of sale and started to leave. Keys are in it, Stormy yelled as he was shutting the overhead doors. Got in my new car and headed home. I looked at the dash and Stormy had given me a full tank of gas. Yeah, that Stormy's a really good guy. As the years would go by, I would find out that, behind the rough and gruff demeanor of some of these guys was a heart of gold. Little did I know that someday I too would become one of these guys. The Saturdays went on, and I looked forward to going to Stormy's and especially seeing Chuck and, getting something to eat off his truck. There was something about Chuck that everybody liked. At 17, I really couldn't figure out, what it actually was all. But all I knew was he really made people feel at ease. It was like he always connected with people. As I grew older, I would realize that it was called charisma. One Saturday, we were extremely busy, so when Chuck pulled in, I was elected to get everybody's food. I went over to Chuck with the order, and while he was filling the order, he remarked, hey kid, how'd you like to make some extra money? Well, that depends, I said. What exactly is it? He told me he was going to be off for the next couple of weeks as he was getting married and going on a honeymoon. He went on to say, my truck will be sitting at the house the whole time. Can you come over, change oil, and, look it over really good? And I said, sure, just give me a list of everything, and you find, and I'll call you when I get back in town. We can go over it. It sounds good to me, I said. The next couple of Saturdays were kind of rough without Chuck's catering, let me tell you. Yours truly got elected to go to McDonald's with all the orders. What a pain in the butt that was. And if that wasn't bad enough, I had to listen to everybody complain about the food and when was Chuck coming back, and I'll have to let Chuck know how much they missed him when he gets back. Fortunately, this was the last Saturday he was going to be gone. I hope. For my sake and theirs. The next day, Sunday, Chuck ended up calling the house. Hey kid, he said, everything check out okay? Yeah, I said I got a small list of stuff, All right, great. Why don't you stop by the house sometime today and I'll take care of you and we can talk about it. Yeah, I don't want to get into anything, over at Stormy's. All right, I'll be over in a little while, I said. Well, that was the first lesson I learned from Chuck. Rule number 1. Never discuss or transact your personal business at work. Well, I drove over to Chuck's shortly thereafter. I went up and rang the front door. What happened next? I was not prepared for, to say the least, nor will I ever forget it. The door opened, and there stood this stunning blonde lady. I have to admit she was breathtaking. To say I was caught off guard was the understatement of the year. The first thing that ran through my mind was the actress Elke Summer. Please look her up, and when you see the pictures of her, double it, and you will have this pretty lady. I'll stop there as pictures are worth 1,000 words. She said hi and yelled back, "Chuck, honey, Clay's here." I thought for a minute, she actually kind of knows who I am. I didn't even know Chuck remembered my first name, as he always called me kid, let alone tell anybody about me. "By the way, I'm Faye," she said. I finally got my wits back about me and said, "Glad to meet you." At that, Chuck was about halfway up the hallway and said, "Come on back to the kitchen." Faye led the way back, and I sat down next to Chuck. "How are you, kid?" he remarked. "All right," I said as I took the list out that I made for Chuck, on his truck. "Well, let me formally introduce you to my bride, Faye Corey. This is Clay Mohr, the kid from Stormy Shell, I was telling you about." I kind of nodded and said, "Nice to meet you again," laughingly. Chuck and I started going over the list. Before I knew it, Faye was setting up, the table with snacks, some pop, water, and there were some slices of pie and a plate also. We finished up, and Chuck paid me. At that, Faye said, "Dig in." "Are you sure?" I remarked. Of course, Clay, you didn't think you were getting out of here without something to eat, did you?" Chuck looked over at me and said, "This is what they call old Southern hospitality." We're having a very nice visit, and the pie was delicious. I found out that Faye was from a town called Cullman in Alabama. Well, it kind of explained her southern accent. I really liked it. She spoke very calmly, and it was almost like a kind of serenity blanketed the room. Chuck had met her a couple of years ago when he was down that way in some kind of business. Well, don't know the particulars, but I guess one thing must have led to another, or we wouldn't be sitting here. That was another thing that Chuck would end up teaching me. Rule number 2. Don't ask too many questions. If people want you to know something, they'll get around to telling you. Well, the conversation finally got around to me when Faye asked, "What do you want to do with your life, Clay?" I guess it kind of caught me off guard for a minute, and then Chuck kind of laughed and said, "Don't sweat it, kid. She's always asking me the same thing." At that, she jokingly hit Chuck on the shoulder and said, "Well, Clay?" I responded, "Yeah, honestly," and I say, "I really haven't given it, a lot of thought. To be honest with you, I still got 1 year, left of high school." Faye responded, "There's no time like the present. You should start thinking about it, Clay." I looked back over at Chuck and commented, "Well, what'd you tell her when she asked you the same thing?" He paused for a moment and said, "I really like the food truck business." Faye said there's no reason why we can't have several trucks. Chuck continued and said how they would like to get into, catering and perhaps, their own restaurant later, on down the road. I thanked Faye for her southern hospitality, told Chuck I'd see him at Stormy's on Saturday. As I was driving home, I thought about Faye and, what she had said and all. kind of stuck in my head. The next Saturday, Chuck rolled into Stormy's, and you could tell everybody was happy that he was back. Everyone gathered around the truck and congratulated Chuck on his new marriage and quickly picked out their lunch. Chuck had a lot of new items. I spotted, some slices of pie. They looked similar to the ones Faye had brought out last Sunday when I was there. Absolutely delicious. Everyone commented on how good the, new food selections were. Chuck said thanks and said he would let Faye know how everyone, liked the food. Got ready to pull out. See you next week, he hollered over to Stormy. Little did everyone know what next week would bring. Chuck showed up the next Saturday. And when the guys got over, to the truck, there was hardly anything left on it. Stormy remarked, "You getting lazy in your old age, Chuck? Looks like you hardly made any food." Chuck was quick to apologize to everybody and said how sorry he was. But he'd been selling out every day by noontime. Guess I have to add another truck. Chuck seemed a little surprised by it all, but I wasn't. Faye Corey, I said to myself. I finished working my senior year at Stormy's and learned a lot. By that time, Chuck's catering had grown to a total of 7 catering trucks. I was helping Chuck with all of them, just like I had the first. Just about every Sunday I would be over at Chuck's house, going over his trucks. And every Sunday, Faye would have something great to eat. She would always ask how I was doing, where I was headed. I didn't mind at all. Most people would consider it, kind of nagging, but that wasn't the case to me at all. I didn't, mind it because I knew Faye was always genuine and a very caring person, especially when it came to me. Always encouraged me to find out what I wanted to do and be good at it. Well, the years went by and Chuck eventually opened his restaurant. He named it the Faye Breeze, and it was an instant success. It was a restaurant and lounge with the piano bar, if I recall. And of course, between Chuck's charismatic personality and Faye's southern charm, they were an instant hit. They eventually sold it and retired down to Georgia somewhere. Faye had always talked about eventually returning to her southern roots. I worked full-time for Stormy once I graduated from high school. Turns out one of Stormy's younger brothers owned a small trucking company. One day he was in getting gas for his pickup when he offered me a job. I said I was interested, but, wanted to talk it over with Stormy first if he didn't mind. No, of course, he said. I'll be back next week. You can let me know then. I thought about it for a day or so and then talked it over with Stormy. Well, I hate to lose you, Stormy remarked right away. But at least you're still in the family, he chuckled. Stormy had always been good to me, and besides back in the day, there wasn't the opportunities that there are now. You never burn a bridge. I accepted his brother Neil's offer. Turns out I found out later that Stormy already knew about it. The two of them just wanted to see how I was going to handle myself. Now that I think about it, to this day, I don't even know if Stormy was his real name. So now I was working on trucks instead of cars. Soon I was driving, making schedules, and bidding on work. Over the next few years, I ran shops, trucking companies, and construction jobs. I often thought of Faye as time passed and our conversations around her kitchen table, especially her encouraging words. I decided one day that if I was good at running someone else's company, then I would be good at running mine. I decided to take a leap of faith and start Clay Mohr trucking and excavating. But that's another story for another time. Faye Corey recently passed away. She lived to the ripe old age of 83. I will never forget the kindness and encouraging words I received from this true Southern belle. She will always have a special place in my heart, bringing the past to the present. I am Clay Mohr.